Well, tabletop gaming is actually kind of a wide, diverse hobby. It includes 4 or 5 major subcategories of gaming. Everybody's played a little bit of tabletop gaming. Monopoly is a tabletop game. It's a board game. And board games is one of our largest categories here. You also have like trading cards that have games like Magic the Gathering, Pokemon trading card games, things like that. There's role-playing games. Most people have heard of Dungeons and Dragons. There's a whole field of role-playing games. Then you have miniatures tabletop gaming, which is like your Warhammer 40K and things like that. That's a lot. You get metal or plastic army guys basically on the table with rules on how the armies fight each other. Each category that we sell usually is flagship by 1 or 2 major games. Magic and Pokemon for trading card games. Warhammer kind of stands above most for tabletop games, but X-Wing and Armada, a couple Star Wars based games do okay. For board games, it's a little more diverse. You know, there's a few really popular titles. You got your Catans and Pandemics and things like that. But really, it's a huge, diverse field of board games. On role-playing, nothing beats D&D.
So collaborating on anything is always exciting to me because I love the idea of starting off with nothing and then you have something when everybody's finished. And that's kind of how a D&D game works, right? You have like 4 people usually. One's a DM, a dungeon master, who pretty much builds the backbone for the narrative. They sit down one night and over a course of nights or weeks or months, they essentially create an amazing narrative or an amazing story. And then just doing that week after week, that just excites me and probably why I still do it today.
So the way that I got into gaming was I was in college and there was a group of guys that would gather in the study hall and play role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons. I would see them gather with their books and their dice, and I would hear all these stories and everybody had their parts to play. And I thought it was really interesting and I wanted to get involved with it. But I was told at the time, girls didn't play D&D. That was something that the guys got together to do. So I went out and I bought books and I thought I'm gonna start my own group. I had no clue how to run a game or even how to be in a game. I didn't know anything about it. Then I met my husband. He is a dungeon master. So he ran the first Dungeons and Dragons game I ever played in. And it was awesome. It was everything that I thought it was gonna be. It always felt like we were all writing together this one big story collectively. And it was so engaging. It was so much fun. It was like you spent the whole week looking forward to this 5-hour block of time to get together with your friends that you haven't seen in a week and just sit and chill and agonize over dice rolls.
I think the #1 reason is usually the social interaction. You know, it's an opportunity to get together with other people and have fun. D&D, you know, in role-playing, you get a little bit more on the creative side. You get to kind of explore and do adventures, whatever you want to do. There's really no limit other than what the game master kind of sets forth, the dungeon master sets forth for you and what you envision your character doing. And so sky's the limit on creativity on that side.
It was the 2nd edition of Dungeons & Dragons. 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons, and I'd already heard stories about it. I actually worked with a guy, and his story sounded so interesting because he would come to work and he would talk about this game where he jumped off a castle, he grabbed a rope, he swung, and he slayed this dragon. I was like, that's the most amazing video game I've ever heard of. What is it? He was like, oh no, that's a tabletop game. It's a D&D game. I love the idea of taking control of a character and going through their life and adventuring. It was a little bit more detailed. It reminded me of movies and books that I read.
So when I first went to my very first gaming convention, it was Gen Con in Indianapolis. I went to what was a tournament. I didn't know that it was a tournament. It was one of the qualifiers for Settlers of Catan. So I go and I sit down at the table with this little old lady sitting across from me, and she had her badge with all of the little flags on it, and I didn't know what any of that stuff meant. And so we were playing the game. And the first few rounds, she goes, I'm just gonna let you play a couple rounds until you get a feel for the game, and then we can play for real. So I was like, okay. So we're playing this game, and we get to a point where she's like, okay, now we're really gonna play. I don't know if you know, but I'm like the #1 player of this game in America. I'm gonna show you how to really play this game. And she tore us up. This little old lady with white hair and her little crochet bag hanging off the back of the chair. This was her domain, and she loved it, and she schooled us that day.
Age groups kind of, I got Pokemon kids that would come in. They were playing from ages 6 and up. Some of the families that come in and do role-playing, most of the families that do role-playing kind of do it at home, but also parents coming in and they're buying like Dungeons & Dragons models, kits and things like that for the kids, and they can be as young as 7, 8. We run D&D summer camps every summer, and they're like, we cap it off at 11, just for maturity reasons, 11 to 18. I've got people, my age, a couple decades older than my age, still playing games they started playing 30 years ago, and they're still playing.
Anybody who wants to game, that is who gaming is for. I have been playing for over 20 years, let's say over 20 years.
Well, tabletop role-playing is probably one of the easiest to get into. You just need to find a group. So there's a lot of ways to find groups. We have a bulletin board, we have Facebook groups. You can say, hey, I'm looking for people, Obviously, if you're meeting people for the first time, there's a little caution, to kind of feel them out. That's one of the reasons we also have a public game room, so people can meet up here, if they're not familiar with people they might want to game with, meet them for the first time, that kind of thing. We do run leagues for like Warhammer sometimes. We also run competitive tournaments, or semi-competitive tournaments anyways, for Magic. We do special events. Sometimes we've had recently with the last Magic event, we had an artist come in and he did signings for his art he did for the game.
I work for a university that I teach psychologists and sociologists how to incorporate Dungeons and Dragons into their therapy sessions. A lot of what we teach is how to identify isolation, how to identify depression, how to identify anxiety, and how to help the collective, collaborative storytelling experience help to bring those things out so that people can talk about them more.